Hello everybody, Jake, your resident content cowboy here. Yeehaw, it's Monday. On Mondays we do tier lists, and on Wednesdays we wear pink.
I declare bankruptcy!
Now I feel like I've been gone for a moment from making tier lists, and this is actually a perfect time to do it because we're getting to do one of my absolute favorite ones. This is a balance patch tier list, a what should be nerfed, what should be buffed in the upcoming balance patch, and honestly, we've been kind of crushing it lately with some of the changes. So I'm going to give my takes on what I think should be changed and what I think we will see changed in this video. Let's get into it. Our tiers for this week. We have our God tier buff. I'm going to put one Pokemon here. We only have one Pokemon in our God tier. We're not friggin' Norse around here. This is a Pokemon that I think more than anything else really needs some love. We have a small buff tier. In general, I think all of our tiers, all the balance in the game is actually pretty good. There are some things that are a little too powerful, some things that are underlooked, but I don't think anything's awful, so I wouldn't need many Pokemon to get massive buffs or anything like that. Maybe a couple feel underwhelming, right? We have our B tier. Ugh. Still got the B tier. We have it as the balanced tier. So these are Pokemon that you really don't need to mess with too much. We have our C tier, the could use a nerf tier. And then we have our D tier, the Decidueye nerf it with fire tier. So we're going to go through every Pokemon in the game, whether or not they could use a buff, nerf, or if they're just doing fine as it is. In general, I think a lot of Pokemon that we put in buff are still doing all right. And maybe a few of the Pokemon we put in nerf are actually a little too powerful. But I like seeing things buffed more than I like seeing lots of crazy nerfs. I don't want, someone's Pokemon to fall off a cliff and become useless. In general, I would like more options to be exciting. Our most recent release was an attacker. That's Armarouge. So yeah, let's start with the attackers here. Cinderace. Cinderace, I think, could be in the small buff category, especially after the glow up that Greninja got. I think Greninja got a really nice glow up for its battle pass, and you could probably do something similar to that with a lot of the other attackers. So let's put him out here. Gren, I love where Greninja's at right now. It's not too powerful, but it's good. It unites a lot, which, really increases its power level for some of the big fights. Love seeing Greninja there. Pokemon like it is Duraludon. I actually don't think we need to buff Duraludon right now. The thing about Dura is it got sort of a slew of buffs, and then it got a bug fix to its boosted attack. So I actually think Dura is doing a lot better than people are probably giving it credit for. It's just not a lot of people play it. Decidueye. I don't think Decidueye needs a buff. I think given the artwork from the event coming up, we have the Darkrai in the middle, Trevenant's there, Mimikyu, Decidueye. I know it's Halloween. These Pokemon are featured there due to that, but I also think they could be featured there because we might be seeing some buffs for them. Decidueye is one that I worry about. I think if you're good with Spirit Shackle Decidueye, you're a monster. And if they buff that thing, ooh boy, get ready. So I think we could see a small buff to it. And then also Razor Leaf is always Razor Leaf. Dragapult. I'm going to put Dragapult in the small buff category. The big reason being, I think the Dragon Dance build is just underwhelming. I think if you gave it a form of hindrance resistance or something like that, this could be a really cool build. But with so much stun and crowd control in the game, it feels crazy to take an attacker deep into enemy lines to do a circle around them in a way that they can see. That just feels... it feels kind of criminal to me. Great. Those are our auto attackers, right? Well, I guess you can kind of put Mewtwo-Y in there. Mewtwo-Y, here's the interesting thing about Mewtwo-Y. I'm going to talk about both Mewtwo's really quick, even though we're on attackers. I know, but I'm talking about both Mewtwo's. I don't think they need to mess with these Pokemon. However, their pick rate is abysmal. And these are Mewtwo's, So I think for their pick rate to be that low, it's a combination of a few things. It's one, that these Pokemon are super boring. They're really, really boring. And two, they're not as broken as they used to be. I don't really want to see a reality where Mewtwo starts getting buffed again just so people start playing it. I think the unfortunate thing is they made boring Pokemon. And if you want the Pokemon to get some play, it's got to be a little cooler. However, I do think there's a reality we see Mewtwo buffs one day. All right, who's next? What attackers do we want to do next here? Let's talk about... We could talk about some of the mages right now. Cram, I don't really see a reason to buff. If you do anything, you could probably buff its Surf build a little bit. Everything else on Cramorant's really good right now. Alolan Ninetales. I think Alolan Ninetales is good, but it's kind of on the lower end of all the mages. Like, let's get some of these mages out here. I'm just going to throw them in the bottom tier here really quick so we can talk about all of them. But I think Sylveon's kind of a mage. It's like a weird one. I think Mage Cram is a weird one. It's okay. And then you've got Alolan Ninetales. I think Alolan Ninetales, when I look at it compared to all the other mages, it's just a little lacking. It's not bad. It just feels like it's a little lacking. So every single mage in this bottom tier, I think, is probably better than it. Outside of, like, you could look at Glaceon and Sylveon in kind of a different way, maybe Inteleon as well. But all these mages here, Pika, Mew, Gardevoir, Espeon, Delphox, and Chandelure, I think are all performing a little bit better than Alolan Ninetales. It's not that A9's bad. I think, honestly, a cool fix for A9 maybe would be to just make it more powerful early. That's already its position in the game, is it's really good early. So maybe lean more heavily into that and have some of the other mages be stronger late game. It's already pretty good early, but I think maybe if you want to like have more of a distinction in the roster, go, look, Alolan Ninetales is not as good as Delphox or Pikachu maybe when it comes to the end of the match, but early on it's a lot better. Right now I think it's kind of on par with things like Pikachu, and then by the end of the game, like especially with Pikachu's new Unite move, I just think Pikachu like dwarfs it, right? Pikachu is a weird one. I do not think they're going to nerf this Pokemon. And I actually don't even want it to get a nerf. But you could nerf Pikachu slightly. You really could. I don't want them to. I'm just putting it out there. It could use a nerf. I don't want to see it nerfed. I like where Pikachu's at. Mew is doing fine. Guardy's doing fine. Espeon, the only thing you could change about Espeon would be Future Sight. Future Sight's kind of bad. Outside of that, Espeon's really good. But if they buffed Future Sight, I wouldn't hate that. It just kind of, like, Psybeam beats it every time. It's so much better. Delphox, I think they could nerf Fire Spin a bit. I think it's just a ridiculous move. And you can see, like, the two Pokemon I have down here in nerfs, they both have these absurd lockdown moves. Shandy, I don't think you need to do much to Chandelure. You could buff it a little. Like, you could up Poltergeist maybe a little. You could do a little bit more with its burn. But I actually think it's pretty good. It's doing its role well. It's just a mage with very low mobility, you know? Inteleon is borderline, could use a nerf, but I mean, I think they're probably not going to mess with it for a while. Sylveon just got changed. I like the changes a lot. Glaceon's a weird one. Here's the thing with Glaceon. I do not want them to buff Glaceon. I don't. But Glaceon is not winning. It's unfortunate, but Glaceon also is a really low skill Pokemon. So you don't want a Pokemon, like it reminds me of Mewtwo's, right? You don't want a Pokemon that is extremely low skill to have that much match influence, because then it's like, well, why would you play something high skill when you could play something that you press and then press one move, it targets them, the enemy can't even get away from it. So I would not like to see it buffed, but I would not be shocked in a world where we see small Glaceon buffs. It's just not performing that well. What attackers am I missing? I know I'm missing Miraidon. And is that the last attacker? It's always so hard. The roster's getting so big that it's always so hard for me to find everybody. I think those are all our attackers right there. I'm sure I'm going to... Oh, Venusaur. See? I told you. I knew I was missing something. Venusaur is a weird one, too, because it's like you don't, like, bundle it in... At least I don't bundle it in with the mages in my brain. But Venusaur's a weird one. And then, of course, we have our newest addition, Armarouge. So, let's talk about each one. Miraidon could definitely use a nerf. Electro Drift is still too powerful. Electro Drift Parabolic Charge is too powerful. It definitely could be in the nerf category. Venusaur, I think, is fine. I wouldn't mess with Venu. I think it's in a good spot. There are times where the meta feels really kind to it, and it gets to do some crazy good stuff with Solar Beam. There are other times where it fights pretty well with Petal Dance and Giga Drain. I wouldn't mess with it. I like it. I like where Venu's at. Armarouge is Nerf City. Armarouge is a very powerful Pokemon, multiple powerful moves. It's weird because its Unite move is bad. Like, I would love to see some interesting balance with this. I would love to see some slight nerfs. Again, slight. I don't want them to gut things in the game. I don't like that. I don't like when something becomes useless. I would like to see some slight nerfs. Probably you could nerf maybe the damage, maybe even the stun duration on armor cannon, and you could do probably a lot with flame charge. It's really yeah, fire spin, sorry. Funny, 2 fire spin abusers down here in the nerf category. In general, Armarouge is just really, really good. It's a very powerful release. Great. So there are attackers right there. And again, Miraidon is very dumb. And it kind of has escaped the nerfs that a lot of the other a lot of the other EX Pokemon ran into, right? Let's talk about Speedsters. I want to talk about Speedsters just because I see Gengar is getting that orange tier hollowware. If you don't know what that is, Sylveon had the orange tier hollowware in the, what is the game calling it? I got the game up right next to me. The game calls it the Treasure Chest Challenge. So there will be a Treasure Chest Challenge. The challenge is figuring out how much money you could spend. The Treasure Chest Challenge for Gengar is coming up. I don't know if we're going to see Gengar buffs. We kind of just did. I think it's actually in a pretty good spot right now, so I'm going to leave it there in the B tier. Still got the B tier. Still got the Lucky Ice Pops. I don't know what I can't stand more. The B tier or Lucky Ice Pops. So Gengar I think is doing pretty well. I would love to see, like, kind of Sylveon got a rework. I would love to see something on Gengar kind of reworked. Like, I think its passive is kind of dumb. I think its Unite move is interesting, but we could just do some cooler stuff with Gengar. So if this went into like the rework category, and that's what we saw out of the orange tier hollowware, I would be interested to see that. Okay, next Speedster, Absol. I don't think you mess with Absol, except I do think Night Slash could use a slight tune-up. So if Absol gets a Night Slash tune-up, I'm there for it. Everything else, Absol's actually doing really well. Talon, they're not going to mess with Talon. You could probably slightly mess with Talon, but it's in that weird spot where they've like buffed it consistently over the past like year and a half, and it's actually doing pretty well. It does its job very well. All right. Zeraora. Always a weird one. Always on the... Here's the problem with all these Speedsters. You just turn up the dial a little too much, and they're completely broken. I think you could maybe mess with Wild Charge a little, but I think the reason Wild Charge is where it is because they nerfed it before they, like, as they changed the leveling on Zeraora, they nerfed Wild Charge. And I think that was the right call, because I think if you buff it, things could get kind of crazy. We'll have to see if they decide to mess with a Pokemon like that. All right, Dodrio, here it's good. They keep nerfing it, but in competitive play, it's not the best thing going. Speedsters in general don't make it into comp play, and all Speedsters are really good in like uncoordinated play. So I wouldn't mess with it too much. I'm going to bring Scyther out here. Scyther is the closest one of the bunch that I could see a little bit of a buff for, but again, in the hands of the right player, it's really good. I don't think you'd want to mess with it too much. The problem is like the skill expression on these Pokemon is really high. So if you buff them, really good players are going to dominate with them. Leafeon's a weird one. Leafeon's a weird one because I think it's good, but I almost think it's like it's kind of fallen off compared to where it used to be, especially given like what's happened with like Solar Blade and stuff like that. But if you buff it, it goes right back to being unbelievably broken at level 4. So what do you do with this thing? You probably leave it where it is. And the same as goes for Zoroark. Zoroark is actually, in the hands of the right player, probably still too good, but it's not crushing the meta right now. It takes a lot of skill to be good with it. In general, I don't see a lot of changes for many of these Speedsters. I feel like the Speedsters are doing pretty well. And then we have Meowscarada, right? Where are you, buddy? Hello, Meowscarada. And then we have Meowscarada, which I actually think we could revert the change to its Unite move. I don't like the change to its Unite move, just like increasing the cooldown of it. But Meow is still good. It's just it requires more skill now. So it is what it is. I'm fine with most of the Speedsters not getting touched, honestly. And We have a Speedster coming out. So I think a lot of the time when you have a class of a Pokemon coming out, you're not going to see huge buffs to other Pokemon in that class. That usually isn't the case. You usually see, like, you might even see nerfs. If they were going to nerf anything in the Speedsters, they'd probably nerf Dodrio again, and they'd probably nerf maybe Leafeon again. Maybe. Okay. Moving on to, let's do our defenders. Let's see. Slowbro, good. They already nerfed it. I wouldn't mess with it. I think it's good. Crustle, very, very good. Again, they already nerfed it. Like, I wouldn't mess with it too much. I like the place it's in. Snorlax. You could give it Snorlax a teeny tiny buff. I wouldn't hate it, but I also don't think it's absolutely necessary. I don't. I think the flail build is always like something that they could have their eyes on for a buff, but it's such a nonsense build that you wonder why they would do it at all. Blastoise. Blastoise is definitely in the buff category. I think they nerfed too many things all at once, and now we don't really know which part of Blastoise was the big problem. And I think Blastoise, like, it falling off on pick rate, it falling off on win rate, I think it's time for this thing to get some buffs. I don't know how much, like, maybe we split the difference between what they did a little while back and kind of see where Blastoise sits, but they just over-nerfed this thing. Mamo, doing great. Won Worlds, but I don't think it's so oppressive that you can't play around it. I like it. Greedent. Greedent's one of the weirdest ones. We don't have a rework category, but I could see a reality where they even brought some of it in line to feel like the other defenders. Another one that kind of, well, we have a few defenders here. I'm going to put Goodra and Lapras all up here. I wouldn't hate seeing buffs on any of these defenders. I don't want them to be broken. I don't want anything to be crazy broken. But Goodra, Lapras, Blastoise, these ones are like big culprits for me. And then Snorlax and Greedent are less so. Blastoise, Goodra, Lapras, to me, are all defenders that have kind of had their role, like their roles are completely outshined by some of the defenders in this game. Completely. So I would love to see some small changes for those. For Goodra, I think I would like to see it make this Pokemon more disruptive to the enemy team. You don't need to give it more HP or recovery or something. It's already the craziest thing in the game for that. But make it a little more disruptive. It doesn't need to be a lot, but turn the dials up on its slow and its disruption just a little bit. Lapras, on the other hand, they need to decide what they want this thing to do, because it doesn't disrupt the enemy team that much. And it used to have a ton of great HP recovery and shell armor. Then they nerfed all that. Like, Lapras was also, just like Blastoise, it was nerfed across the board. And now I feel like you walk away, and it doesn't have that much of an identity in the game. Except for being a low-tier defender, basically. Trevenant. Trevenant could use a nerf. Trevenant will probably not get a nerf. I can't imagine them buffing it unless they reverted the pain split nerf that they did a while back, which I could see. I don't think it was like so broken that like it was like ruining the game. It actually could use a nerf. It's one of the better defenders in the game, but don't expect it. Like a lot of these things, Pikachu, Delphox, Trev, don't expect nerfs on these. Also, probably not on Armarouge because it's pretty recent, right? But don't expect nerfs on Trevenant. I'm just saying it is really powerful. All right. Umbreon, right there with Trevenant. I think Umbreon's too good. It's good as a defender. It's good as like a defender support. It's almost good as like a full support. I like it a lot, and it's also, in my opinion, like it's too good. It's just way too good. If you're going to nerf a defender, it's going to be one of these two or this one. I don't know what you do about this. I don't know what you do about Ho-Oh. You could make its entire kit bad, and it still has a team-wide revive that is just really hard to figure out. Maybe Pokemon that are revived are not invulnerable for a moment there. Maybe you can't do a full team revive. Maybe there's another way that they can manage how many players can be revived. Maybe the time where you can revive them, maybe it's not their entire respawn timer. Maybe you have to make a decision a lot faster, like that feather like goes away pretty quick, like 5 seconds that feather's gone. So you need to make your call. Are you reviving a player? Like they could do something with Ho-Oh. It's really good. Really, really good. And I believe those are all of our defenders. We'll talk supports just because some of the supports are defenders. Wiggly is good. You could buff one aspect. Okay. I would love to see the rollout. You know what? I have to put it here. I want the rollout from the Chinese beta. Give me that change. That would be so freaking cool. I want it. Yes, I want it. Also, I think it's Unite move. You don't need to do much, but give it a hair. Like, give it 200 more HP. You know? Give it 150 more HP on the shield. I just want to see, like, can we make this Unite move a little more impactful? Because sometimes I feel like Wiggly uses its Unite and it's absolutely nothing. You have to be very careful because all of a sudden it becomes a team-wide unstoppable shield, but you can do a little more here. Mime, I wouldn't mess with Mime. Mime's really good, but, you know, not broken. Really good in the hands of a skilled player too, which I think is cool. Now we're going through the rest of the supports. In general, I don't want supports nerfed because I like supports being good. And I like that Pokemon Unite cares that its defenders and supports are good. Because otherwise, players wouldn't pick them ever, right? So LD, I wouldn't want any changes. I could see a slight Leaf Tornado buff. Outside of that, I think it's great. Blissey is great. You could probably nerf its Unite move. I always bring this up, but it is too good. Hoopa is always too good, but Hoopa's really cool, and I like cool supports, so I wouldn't mess with it too much. Comfey is, you just destroy the thing. I'm going to keep it in this category regardless. I hate this thing. It's awful. It's bad for game balance. There it is. It's just awful. But you probably don't need to mess with it too much, but I just hate it. The problem with it is when you're playing an uncoordinated play, like I often do solo queue, if you are against a duo or trio and they're running Comfey and the broken Pokemon du jour, it's crazy. If they're running Comfey Ceruledge, Comfey Blaziken, Comfey Armarouge, like, come on, man. Do you not feel like you have to take a shower after every match? Clefable, doing good. They could do a slight buff to Draining Kiss, the Draining Kiss build, but they don't need to. I think it's actually better than people think. Sableye. Sableye is one that I could see a buff to for Shadow Sneak. And it's got to be slight because it was so dumb upon release, but it's like just not very good right now. Knockoff, I think, is definitely the way to go. It's like a massive stun, multiple hits of a stun into multiple enemies. If you want Shadow Sneak and maybe even Feint to be a little better, you could use some slight buffs to these moves. Also, here's one that it really could. That Feint attack that it uses, don't make me come out of invisibility when I hit people with that. Why? Why would I? It feels weird. It's like I'm like laying these traps for my opponents and then they trigger them and I lose part of my passive. Why? That makes no sense. Actually change that. That's very dumb. Okay. Next, all-rounders. Let's take a look at all these all-rounders. Garchomp's doing great. I don't think you need to mess with it much at all. It's great. It's not like broken, but it's really good. Machamp. Machamp has been left out in the cold for a long time. We need to do something about Machamp. I don't know what's going on with it, but it's clearly been forgotten. Lucario is good. It's not what it was, and that's okay. It's fine. Charizard. I don't really want them to mess with Char too much. It just got good, and it hasn't been for a long time. And you can play around it to an extent. I could see them taking, like, if they wanted to nerf maybe the duration of its Unite move, like, I don't know how long its Unite move lasts. Maybe its Unite move lasts, like, 8 seconds, 5 seconds. I don't know. But if you wanted to shave a second off of its duration on its Unite move, I'd hear you out. Outside of that, I know it's great, but I wouldn't want to mess with it. Zarina, please God, don't buff it. Dragonite, good. The only thing I could see a buff on is extreme speed, because I do think Dragon Dance is probably better for Outrage and for Hyper Beam. So if you did anything, it would be a slight buff. You could even probably knock a half second off the cooldown on it. Just knock a little bit off of extreme speed. But other than that, I think it's doing really well. Aegislash. Ironhead's bad. It's just bad. It doesn't work in this meta. It doesn't, like, so many things multi-hit. Like, think about it. If you get hit by Chandelure, you're getting hit 80 times. If you get hit by Ceruledge, you got wound damage. You're getting hit 80 times. If you get hit, like, so many things. If you get hit by a Solar Beam, you're taking 90 ticks of damage. Ironhead just doesn't make a lot of sense in a reality where you are getting hit and taking so many instances of damage. Now, If you did like Iron Head negates 3 instances, like same time frame window, but 3 instances of damage are negated, okay, maybe, or 2 maybe. Or it's something where when you use Iron Head, rather than like multiple instances, it's just like that little time when Iron Head is active, it's fully invulnerable. Could it be broken? Maybe. Yeah, maybe. But in general, Iron Head's bad. So I would love to see some buffs for Iron Head. Azu, as always, I actually really like Azu. I think the only thing about it is its late game's kind of weak. So kind of like Alolan Ninetales, I would like to see either its late game get a slight buff. You could just do like, you know how they've had the scaling stats recently where it's like early on they stay the same, but end of game they're a little bit better. I think that's totally fair for Azu. You do that and you kind of fix any problem I have with it, really. Buzzwole. I think Buzzwole's biggest problem are Buzzwole players, but it just can't seem to crawl its way out of being low win rate. From on the dev side, I think the conversation must be like, how can we slightly buff this thing? I don't think it needs it, really. I'm going to put it in balance, but if you see it buffed, I wouldn't be shocked. T-Tar, okay. Ancient Power right now is kind of garbage. Kinda. Sandtomb is really good after like the recent buffs. Ancient Power is just kind of eh. This whole Pokemon's really hard because it's supposed to be a late game monster, and if you're good at farming, you'll get there. I don't know if they're going to mess with it at all. In fact, I would doubt they mess with it if they do a slight buff to Ancient Power. Scissor, I think Scissor's biggest problem is the rest of the all-rounders in the meta are insane. I wouldn't mess with it too much either. Like, I think a lot of the all-rounders are pretty good. I just think certain things are kind of crazy. Dark Bear, Water Bear are both like teetering into the use a nerf category, along with Zacian, along with Blaziken, along with Mimikyu, along with Gyarados, and along with Cerulege. Let's face it, these all-rounders are crazy. They really are. Char could be in this, like, honestly, Char could be in this category as well. Char could hang out here. All of these Pokemon are little nuts. I'm going to lower my camera right here just so you can see them a little better. All these Pokemon are a little nuts. I would like the other all-rounders brought to be as good, but there's no question that all these things are a little too OP. I'm going to keep Char here. I'm going to keep Dark Bear here. I'm thinking you could mess with Water Bear. It's a really hard one. If they don't, I'm not freaking out. Same thing with Zacian and Blaziken. Zacian is still really good and you barely see it. And then Blaziken just recently had like a little nerf. Now, Gyarados, Mimikyu, and Cerulege. Mimikyu it's well past time for this thing to get a little nerf. It is on the poster for the Halloween event. You're not seeing it. That's just my guess. Gary could actually use a buff to Aqua Tail and probably a small nerf to other parts of it. Could probably use a small stat nerf or something like that. Gyarados is really good. Cerulege is way too good. It's way too good. It's still way too good. It's like, it's one of the culprits of like needing a nerf pretty bad. I'd put it down here in the decision why you gotta nerf it. I don't want him to gut it again. This is the reason I have this tier is just like this thing is like way too good. Metagross, good. If they do anything, you could actually buff Meteor Mash just a little bit, because Meteor Mash is like not performing, but everything else in its kit's doing well. And then Phalanx. Phalanx definitely needs a buff. Phalanx is one of those Pokemon that just makes you sad, because it was so good, and then they nerfed it, and they didn't do anything to compensate. I've talked about this so much with Phalanx, but you could have done a few things to compensate for the nerfs you were giving it. All right. Now, in the buff category and the nerf category, I'm going to look at it. Armarouge, I think, needs to be in the nerf it with fire category, alongside probably Miraidon, just because they keep forgetting Electro Drift. Everything else, I think, is about where it's at. Ho-Oh is a culprit as well. Now, out of this, what do I expect is going to happen? Not much. Maybe a little here or there. I don't think we're going to see huge nerfs, and I don't want huge nerfs. But I think all of the Pokemon in the C and D tier here could very well get nerfs. The only other Pokemon like Mimikyu could also, it's close, and Char also is pretty close. So if they mess with those, I'm not freaking out about it. In the buff category, when it comes to like Pokemon who need buffs the most, I think about Lapras. I think about Goodra. I think about Phalanx. And I think about Machamp. These ones for me are like the biggest, like, of like the Pokemon that are kind of forgotten the most, right? In my heart of hearts, I think Machamp is just, unfortunately, I don't think it's like the number one. For me, it's either Lapras or Phalanx. And here's my reasoning behind both. Lapras was a huge, huge thing, and now it's gone. And Phalanx just got released, and it's not played at all. Like, Phalanx was one of the more recent... What did it go? It went Armarouge, Ceruledge... Armarouge, Ho-Oh, Ceruledge, Phalanx, right? Is that the... I think it's something like that, right? And it's just too recent. And I think that's a real shame, and its design is so cool. So even though I think Lapras could really deserve it, my god tier pick for Pokemon that could use a buff and probably deserves it is Phalanx. As always, I would love to hear from all of you in the comments. What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? Let me move this a little bit. I realize I'm cutting off Char. Sorry, Char. What Pokemon really need a nerf? What Pokemon really need a buff? I want to hear it in the comments. And how close do you think we get to the patch here? There's a lot here we talked about, right? I think definitely we could see some ghosts messed with in the patch. I don't know what else they're going to do, but some of these real low pick rates like Phalanx, Lapras, Goodra, Machamp, like some of these Pokemon are just like completely forgotten, and I think they could use some love. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for listening. I love you all. I love being here on a Monday, of course, and I will see you all next time. We did it.